Ladies and gentlemen,
Oh,
we are here to talk about what
oh God.
was definitely the worst assault on Western culture that took place in 2001.
Oh my God. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Well, speaking of assaults, folks, if you have any interest in assaults yourself, today's episode of Not That Bad is brought to you by Pro Set Desert Storm Cards. That's right.
Why do you have
Your
that?
one your one-stop shop for educational cards, 10 educational cards per pack in a Pro Set Desert Storm Cards pack covering things such as geography, military skills, intelligence files, leaders, military assets, personnel, and governments from around the world. Not only are you going to get an educational pack of cards, collect them all, it looks real nice. I have two full sets myself and more to come. But if you bought these back in 1991 when they were released, 100% of the proceeds would go to benefit the families of Desert Storm veterans. So go out, purchase your pack of Pro Set Desert Storm cards today, and join the front. Now, welcome back to Not That
Was
Bad.
that a real sponsorship? Was that a real...
Welcome back to Not That Bad Season 2,
Am
which
I
is my
unwittingly a part of a psyop?
oh God. Well, folks, as my illustrious co-host, Mr. Gabe Tice, has stated, we are talking about a movie today, and that means we're back for another episode of Not That Bad here in Season 2, which is my favorite show, because it is my show. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Connor, aka Freddy, who has yet to be fingered. And of course, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Gabriel Tice. Gabe, I want to ask you, how you doing today, man?
Uh, Good until I learned that I have to boycott my own show.
My wife overheard me doing that ad read and texted me WTF. Yeah, that was a fun one. But speaking of fun ones, we're here to talk about a really interesting movie, one that I don't know anybody
Do
would have
not
seen coming
undersell
on this
this.
show.
Do not undersell the cultural event that was Freddy Got Fingered. And I'm not being facetious by saying that.
Ah,
This is a time to take people back to this moment where people could still be shocked and deeply offended. Not this kind of passively offended that we've all incorporated into our lifestyles, right? Like we go on the Bird app or the X app and something comes across our feed to ruin our day. Like this was something that triggered people. It was this moment where uh a some guy from Canada could come down here and produce something that offended decent people everywhere. And the amount of nostalgia I had for that moment in time, like, really took me by surprise. Yeah, we're talking about Freddy Got Fingered, released in 2001, written, co-written, directed by and starring none other than Thomas Green, who let's read his Wikipedia bio really quick, because there were some things I learned here that I want to share with everybody else. Okay, so this is how
oh
Tom
no.
Green is introduced by his Wikipedia. Okay, Michael Thomas Green is a Canadian comedian, show host, actor, filmmaker, podcaster.
Ooh,
Okay, we're in safe territory so far, and rapper.
Tom Green was a rapper. He did do some rapping. It's weird these okay, so we have to contextualize Tom Green for a minute here because if you are under the age of like 35, you are not very familiar with Tom Green, and if you're under our age, you probably don't know who he is, maybe past hearing him in a lyric of from the Real Slim Shady, because his name is said in the Real Slim Shady. Um, this is Tom Green is a flash in the pan. You know, he's one of those people where if you didn't exist from like 1999 to
That's
2002, you
that's
would
a
have
little
no
harsh.
fucking idea who this guy is.
Flash in the pan. We're
Listen,
already insulting a man who honestly has had an outsized influence on popular culture.
Oh,
I
listen,
mean,
he has. You're right, and I'm gonna be praising the hell out of Tom Green during this. But here's the thing. Unless you happen to catch the Celebrity Apprentice in the mid 2000s, outside of like the year 2002 ending, there is no Tom Green. No, as far as anything is concerned, Tom Green does not. It's like he dropped off the face of the earth, even though he's been in plain sight this whole time, doing streams with Andy Milonakis, making people uncomfortable in public places, like he's always been known to do. Tom Green is somebody who you say that name and it doesn't mean anything to anybody. It means something to me, but Tom Green was a guy who kind of showed up after he had a public access television show in Canada from 1994 to 96 that garnered this sort of like cult following throughout Canada. And somehow a network executive sees it at CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company Corporation, something like that. They decide to air a pilot for the show, and they immediately give it to one of their subsidiaries, the Comedy Network, which ended up taking the show and airing it through 1997 through 2 seasons. This garnered so much attention that MTV comes a calling and gives Tom Green an American version of the show, which aired on MTV for a decent amount of time. He did take a year off, I think the second year the show aired in 2000 he was treated for testicular cancer, so that's terrible. But he was sort of that Jackass era comedian. I mean, he was really the inspiration for things that we see today, like the Eric Andre show, or like Tim and Eric ended up becoming around that time. That was sort of like Tom Green's whole thing.
it wasn't just that he was a part of that movement. He was a pioneer. I'm not
That's
kidding when I say that he has this outsized influence, because the Tom Green show starts circa 96, 97, really, and it gets exposure in American networks when MTV picks him up. According to your timeline, that's late 90s. Okay, so Jackass
yes.
premieres on MTV in 2000,
Hmm.
and of course, you had other forms of this cultural movement in comedy preceding Tom Green, like Beavis and Butthead, but
Right.
that was a cartoon. That was
Yeah.
animation. Nobody had to physically go out in public and defame themselves for the sake of entertainment, the way Tom Green so flagrantly did in the mid 90s. And by the time MTV picks him up, he is this notorious person. I feel like culturally he is persona non grata, even though he's become this big name. He attracts the attention of Hollywood. His future wife, Drew Barrymore.
The dude married Drew Barrymore.
But before he married Drew Barrymore, she calls him up and says, "Hey, I love your work. Would you like to have a role in my upcoming Charlie's Angels movie?" So he
Yes.
starts appearing in mainstream Hollywood through these smaller roles in major movies. He's also in Road Trip,
Yes.
which, you know,
He's a sidekick in Stealing Harvard as well. How could you forget Jason Lee's
that's
Stealing Harvard?
after Freddy Got Fingered. That's in the revisionist era of Tom Green. Okay, where
I full disclosure, I know it sounds like I'm shitting on Stealing Harvard. I actually kind of enjoy Stealing Harvard.
it
So
could be a candidate for this show, could it
could
not?
be. It's on my list, so we'll see if it makes it. We'll see if it makes the cut.
But he's just this subversive agitator. I don't know. You could also compare him to a Sacha Baron Cohen type. There's
Yeah.
definitely that element of agitation, but Sacha Baron Cohen was politically charged, and even though Tom Green was, you could say what he was doing was socially subversive, right? He was going out into public squares and testing the limits of decency and normalcy, and kind of upending what people think should be permissible in polite society. I mean,
Yeah.
I think people think he is this extremely lowbrow, aggressively lowbrow form of comedy, right? Obviously, he has his fans, and some of those fans, had cachet in Hollywood, enough cachet to get
Give
him
him his
his
own movie.
own feature film.
it's It's absolutely insane. It really does feel like you could draw parallels to an Eric Andre, who has a similar type program, who does a lot of similar skits on his program, and was also given pretty much carte blanche to do whatever he wanted with a movie. And it's kind of insane to see those two kind of parallels because Eric Andre is a name that a lot of people know, and of course, like romantically linked to famous people as well, and like several famous people, I think. And it's pretty crazy to see this. Like they really are like kindred spirits in a weird way. And I hope Eric
Okay.
Andre fans aren't offended by that, and I hope Tom Green fans aren't offended by that.
Right. The difference is Eric Andre, who has his own forays into the world of filmmaking, right?
Absolutely.
He has not been nominated for like 7 Razzies. Okay.
No, this movie itself won 5.
This movie won 5. It was the Everywhere Everything All at Once of the Razzies
Yes, it was.
back in, the ceremony of 2002. And this is the contrast of where the culture was then to where it is now.
Yeah.
Okay, today the Razzies are, I feel like, widely understood to be villains of film criticism.
Yeah, I just saw a whole thing on Elon Musk's app talking about that the Razzies, about how terrible it was, and even though they agreed with some of the films that were nominated this year, that they still think it's a terrible thing for movies.
Right. Like, I'm not saying that the Razzies, like, not everything the Razzies nominates is good or doesn't deserve the sort of mockery or derision
Or is
that,
morally acceptable to be there, like
well,
nominating a child for
like
worst
nominating a
actress.
child, which again, it's a testament to how culture has changed. Like, I don't think
Right.
people would have flinched if the Razzies of yesteryear had nominated, an adolescent. Like, I just don't think,
I'm sure they
like,
have.
like I'm not sure if Jake Lloyd was nominated for Phantom Menace, but if he had
No,
been, nobody comes out to shame the Razzies for
no,
daring to pick on a child.
no.
There was a
Sensibilities have
line.
changed. Yeah,
There was a
this.
line of people to pick on Jake Floyd
Yeah,
and other, kid actors.
yeah.
So Tom Green gets $14 million
It's insane.
to make his own movie, and this is beyond just like a vehicle, right? We talked about a vehicle for another comedian on the last episode. We talked about Black Sheep, which existed only to be a vehicle for Chris Farley's film career and
Yes.
middling success, largely forgotten, basically obscure now. When Tom Green makes Freddy Got Fingered, he enters into the canon uh vulgar auteur. Like, he becomes this beyond infamous figure and this kind of roguish character to people. Like, I can only compare the moral sort of outrage surrounding Freddy Got Fingered to, I would call it like the comedy equivalent to Salo, right? If people are familiar with that, or Last Tango in Paris. I think Showgirls might be the best comparison. Another
Yeah.
movie that was surprisingly well produced, like had a, had A-list talent involved, had hype, had buzz, already before it comes out because of some of the things that people had learned about the production and the story and everything. It
Right.
already has like hype around it, definitely curiosity. And Freddy Got Fingered comes out and it gets a rare 0 stars from Roger Ebert.
Do you know what's interesting about that though? We just covered Black Sheep, right? 28% on Rotten Tomatoes. You care to take a stab at the Rotten Tomatoes score for Freddy Got Fingered?
At the critic score,
Yes.
uh 8%.
56%.
That must be revisionism. No, that must be okay. That has to
Dude,
be
this has a 2.9 on Letterboxd. That's why I brought it to the show right now. It's almost ineligible. We're
it's almost
almost out of
ineligible
range.
because again of how culture has shifted. Obviously, if you polled people back then, which basically they did, henceforth the Razzies, right?
Right, of course.
This is the worst movie of 2001. It's one of the worst movies of the decade. You go on any sort of like talk about this movie circa the 2000s, and it's like one of those movies that killed a career. Like this movie supposedly killed Tom Green's career, even though you already mentioned a major movie that he co-starred in, that was not a big hit, but he clearly continued to be a working performer afterwards. But let's compare that, right? So, what would you say the changes in perception from Freddy Got Fingered back in 2001 to now to this moment?
So I've been trying to think about it, and even back then, Roger Ebert said in his review that someday people may turn around and see this as like a neo surrealism, masterpiece. But he did say that you could think of it that way, but you can never think of it as funny.
Yeah.
But I do think something that may have helped at least the internet community get behind this movie. I want to bring this up because this is what helped me come around to this movie and has helped me. I have to give all the credit to somebody who very well could have been tongue in cheek explaining his thoughts on this, but absolutely made sense to me watching the movie. And that's Mike Stacklasa of Red Letter Media fame. Red Letter Media covered this movie a little while ago, and talked about how, well, Mike specifically, about how he does believe that whether by accident or by design, this was sort of a genius work from Tom Green, who was giving us a satire of movies of the time. I don't think that's what has turned around everybody, but reading through the comments, there's definitely a large amount of people who have. One thing that I think has really helped it outside of that, though, is the fringe. The fringe of society is always going to gravitate towards things that other people would hate. And right now, the pendulum is sort of swung back to like the 1950s, where everybody kind of wants to, we can't say bad words and we can't say things that are too mean or too offensive or too anything, because everybody will get upset. And this is a movie that is unapologetically and at times aggressively offensive. And I think when you gravitate towards things like that, it's seen in a different light. And I think since then, the people who have continued to follow Tom Green's career at all see that this guy is out of his mind, in the best way
Or
possible.
is he? Is he, or
I
did he
think
just go unappreciated in his
I
time?
think both are true. Truthfully, and I'll
I,
get more into that as we discuss the movie, but I think both are true and both can be true.
I think there's truth to both those statements. I don't think it's the whole truth, and I think there's both about Freddie Got Fingered and Tom Green's career as a whole. I think both of the haters and the revisionists, the people who have kind of gone back and tried to reclaim the whole Tom Green experiment as being a success. I just don't think either one of those camps seem to get it completely right. But sticking with Freddie Got Fingered for right now, because you touched on a very important element, which is that this movie is a product of its time, and that not just it couldn't be made today, but it embodied everything about um, the the comedic scene that produced it. It embodied all of those elements aggressively in a way that absolutely defies conventions today. And a lot of people kind of go back and are now looking back, maybe fondly or questioning their hatred for people like Michael Bay, right? Michael Bay, who used to be obviously the antichrist of Hollywood,
Right.
the anti Christopher Nolan. You do see some revisionism there, and I'm not going to weigh in on that personally. Like, do I agree or disagree? Those stylistic flagrances embody this cultural capacity for individualism in a way that seems impermissible now from the monolithic idea of Hollywood that we have it. Like Tom Green does things in this movie that just flies in the face of conventional wisdom for what flies in conventional wisdom for Hollywood today. Like, does that make sense? It's not just that he's politically incorrect. It's that
No.
he was given a blank check to do something that most filmmakers just don't have the permission from studios to do right now, which is to dare to just be audacious in any sense of the word.
So this has the sensibilities of every other movie that came out around that time period. You know, the stuff about, you know, there's something about Mary, American Pie era of movies, right? But it takes everything that you'd see in those movies, and what it does keep, it turns up to 10 million. And what it doesn't keep, it sets up in a scene somewhere, and it's almost like Tom Green set up every scene in his head, and then just threw a landmine in there, you know, and just waited for somebody to step on it. And as soon as they did, the scene turned to chaos. The scene turned to insanity, and it's almost every scene in this movie that acts that way, and it's so profoundly in your face, and it's so profoundly aggressive that it feels like the most extreme form of parody that I've ever seen.
Yeah, the extreme form of parody, and I definitely understand the analysis there. Like I remember watching Red Letter Media's analysis of this, and they were the first people to even dare to ask the question, "What if this movie's actually good?" Like I feel
We
like,
got to give him credit.
yeah, we gotta give them credit. I'm sure they weren't the first people to ask that, but they're the first people to make me consider watching the movie because up until that point, I mean, it just sounded like a movie that had really nothing to offer except controversy. But like Showgirls before it, there is a method to the madness, right? I would argue, and it is an intentional movie. I'm not going to say that all of the outrageous antics are like justified by the story. That's definitely not the case. Definitely not. I can think of a few of the more infamous moments off the top of my head, right? Like why does Gordy on his trip to Los Angeles stop to suddenly masturbate a horse? I don't know. I don't know.
Dude.
There is a payoff at the end, so you can't say that it's just haphazardly thrown in there. It's a pivotal plot point, but
Okay.
you know when it happens, you just have to accept the fact that the movie's not going to be playing on the terms of like just conventional story structure.
Well, we have defended a lot of movies on this show, and oddly enough, this movie has more that comes back later in the movie than a lot of the movies that we've brought here. And it's kind of insane coming off of a movie like Black Sheep that we kind of had some complaints about, like character arcs and things coming back and things making sense, and it just felt like a series of sketches. And I'm not saying that this is not that. Believe me, if you watch it, this is a series of Tom Green being absolutely out of his mind in the movie, his character. Which, by the way, I just want to throw this out there. So Tom Green, obviously the star of the movie, director, co-writer. His name is Gord, sometimes Gordy, and I believe he is arguably, in the context of the movie itself, in context of films, the most annoying and unlikable protagonist in a movie. Is that fair to say?
Well, it depends on how we're defining these terms, right? By the way, we haven't set up the story at all. So for anybody who has not
Oh
seen Freddy
boy.
Got Fingered, right?
Buckle
Okay.
up.
Here, I mean, there's no point in actually breaking down the
It's
plot.
it's kind of a movie about Tom Green getting to make Freddy Got Fingered.
You could say it's analogous for his career, right? And a
Yes.
lot of comedians, given the opportunity to make a film, they choose to go this almost semi autobiographical, again, analogous route. And it's a
Right.
really interesting way to see not only, what do these filmmakers think of themselves? Like if this is Tom Green's way of expressing his story, that gives us a lot of insight. But it's also this really fun way to to see their take on what they consider to be the universal quest for success, right? This is Tom Green chasing a dream that we all have, right? The way he gets there is by you know um I don't know, wrapping himself with the skin of a deer that he found on the side of the road, or whatever shenanigans gets there. But it's a universal quest, and that's why I don't agree that Gordy is the most annoying character. I mean, he's the most unhinged. He's the most unstable. He's he has a distressing lack of self-awareness, to put it mildly. But at the same time, does he annoy me more than the kind of characters that Jim Carrey would play? Like, is he more annoying than Ace Ventura? I would submit this.
Oh,
No,
dude, oh,
he's not.
you're gonna,
He's not. And
Jesus.
I say that as a huge Jim Carrey fan.
Ooh.
But I mean, Jim Carrey was transparently playing obnoxious characters. I mean, that's not a secret. That's not even an accusation. It's an observation.
Ooh. That take was so hot, I'm sweating right now.
I didn't even mean for that to be a hot take. That is the least
I
hot take I
think
probably have.
with
We
you,
haven't even gotten into it.
okay, with what you said about Jim Carrey, right? Playing those characters that are intentionally annoying or outwardly annoying, like in Ace Ventura, or even like we covered Batman Forever, which also features Drew Barrymore. Just a quick shout out to Drew Barrymore and Eddie K. Thomas, who are both joining the Two Timers Club here on Not That Bad, from Batman Forever and from American Pie 2, respectively.
By the way,
and I also Lorena Gale, who was in this movie and Halloween Resurrection.
I hate to nitpick, Connor. I really do. But as your co-host, I have to correct you. You're mispronouncing her name. It's Drew Scabbymore. Okay, I know the way it's spelled, but it's pronounced Scabbymore, like to scab, like to bring back your daytime talk show in the middle of a strike.
Moving on. Um, no, I do want to throw that out there that they are both coming back to the show, but okay. I think there's no other way to continue talking about this movie than just bringing some things up. Because I think without the context of what happens in this movie, if somebody's coming to this and they're going, huh, these guys are not that bad, right? So I haven't seen this movie. Maybe I'm thinking of seeing this movie. Maybe I've never thought about it. Let's see what these guys can tell me. We're not going to paint a very pretty picture as far as the things we're going to be discussing, because it is impossible to paint a pretty picture of the things that occur in this movie. However, we may put them into a light, hopefully, that will that will hopefully give you guys a good idea of whether or not you want to see this.
Let me make something clear. I am not going to apologize for this movie. I'm not going to sanitize it.
No.
It's like, this movie's not for everybody. Going to a Sex Pistols concert was not for everybody. Does not mean it was not a transformative, valuable moment in the history of popular culture. I'm not going to apologize for the Sex Pistols. I'm not going to apologize for Tom Green.
No, nor should I. I don't think anybody should apologize for Tom Green, not even Tom Green.
He never would.
And I hope he never does.
Go off, King. By the way, if anybody, something I did for research was just watch a lot of Tom Green's interviews before and after this movie. And my question was, because I've never seen him publicly talk. Like, I've never seen him actually just be himself, right? Out of character. I was wondering, is he one of those guys where he is the character, or he won't be out of character, like an Andy Kaufman type? Like, well, like, how does Tom Green act, if anything, differently from his persona? All that is to say, post Freddy Got Fingered, he was remarkably eloquent in some of the interviews that I saw him in. For example, he had this little sit down and debate with Bill O'Reilly, and I kept waiting for the punchline to come up. Like, I was sure that Tom Green had this kind of trick up his sleeve. He's not just going to have an actual congenial civil discussion with Bill O'Reilly. And he smirked. He had asides. He seemed to be running circles around Bill O'Reilly, but at no point does he break down the convention of what they're there to do, which is to have a discussion. He just actually makes very sincere points. So he's a real person. Tom Green is a real human being. I think I want to demystify that idea, because a lot of people might actually get the impression from this film that he is psychotic, that a truly disturbed person made this movie. And I don't think that's the case.
But I wouldn't blame somebody for thinking that, because there are some scenes in this movie that made me question my admiration for it.
Look, as a
And they do.
pro-choicer, I defend Tom Green's right to swing that baby around his head.
One of many. And here's the thing about this movie. It doesn't even try to start in a way that's like completely off base for what you're going to see for the rest of the movie. It has this intentionally, what I feel is intentionally awkward and repetitive dialogue. It has tropes that you wouldn't think would fit in a movie like this. I mean, this opens up with a skateboarding sequence. So let's take
I thought
people
it
through
had a
the
strong
opening.
opening, by the way. I feel like it actually almost lures you in. I feel like it tricks you into
It's a false
thinking
sense of security, I think.
false sense of security. It tricks the skateboarders in the crowd. It tricks the audience who might have gone to see Road Trip that they're in for something a lot more conventional to their taste than what they're experiencing. The first challenge of the movie, I think, presents itself with what's the first WTF moment of the movie?
Well, if you're paying any attention to the movie, there is this there the dialogue in that first scene. So first off, what's happening makes no sense. So Gord
What are you
Gord's
talking about? It makes
parents.
perfect
No,
sense.
listen,
It makes
listen,
perfect
listen.
sense.
Gord's parents buy him tickets to get on a bus to Los Angeles, which, by the way, they say a bus to Los Angeles every sentence during a period of time in this opening sequence of the movie, where Tom Green's like, "I'm going to get on this bus to Los Angeles, and I'm going to get on the bus and I'm going to go on the
Why does your
bus."
Tom Green sound like Jimmy Stewart?
And then he goes to get on the bus, and then his dad says, who's Rip Torn, by the way, the man who once got so intoxicated he thought a bank was his home.
Yeah, go
He
off, King. Go.
Yeah.
Every
Uh,
time I see Rip Torn in any performance ever, I'm just like, go off, King. Every time he
Patches
enters the frame.
O'Houlihan is a legendary character from Dodgeball. There's so many roles where this guy just shines through.
I think most people would go to like the Larry Sanders show, but yes,
No,
yes,
Patches
Dodge.
O'Houlihan. That's my guy. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. But he tells him he's not getting on that bus to Los Angeles, which he says. And then Tom Green says, "You got me a ticket to ride the bus to Los Angeles." And you get to a point where you're like, "What the fuck are they doing?" And this is not the first time this happens in the beginning. He says the word LeBaron about 50 times after his parents give him a car. And he also, there's this awkward moment.
Here's the thing: you're doing this thing that I really resent
Oh
in discussion
no.
about not just this movie, but a lot of comedies that are coming from this like really really angular place, right? This kind of jagged edge. Um, what it's obviously supposed to be funny. Like
No, and that's the
it's
thing.
obviously supposed to be funny. It's the
I
same
am
thing with
laughing.
but you're not granting that intention to him. You called it awkward as if to
Mm-mm.
imply that Tom Green doesn't know what he's doing.
No. Listen to me. I think every single thing in this movie is intentional. I think everything you see, from mistakes like Rip Torn avoiding a camera at one point. You can see him step out of the way of a camera coming through. There's a scene where the color grading's completely off. There's scenes where you just think like the audio's all screwed up. I think every single thing in this movie is intentional, including the awkwardness. Tom Green made a career before he made this movie out of making people feel uncomfortable. I think every bit of uncomfortableness in this movie, including seeing graphic scenes of child injury, I think are absolutely intentional. I think they're satirical. I think they're perfect, and I think I'm just gonna come out and say it now. In the Red Letter Media episode, they kind of went back and forth on whether or not they thought it was intentional genius or not. I think Tom Green is an intentional comedy genius for this movie because I think everything that he did was so intentional that it could easily, and I mean easily, be considered the worst movie of all time by some people.
You know, I feel like people use the term genius pretty liberally these days. Like I see a
I would
lot
say
of
so. Yeah.
hyperbole, like
Oh yeah.
calling movies a masterpiece, calling so and so a
Yes.
genius. And it cuts the opposite way. Like this very movie. Some people think it is actually one of the worst movies ever made.
Yep.
An opinion which I just cannot respect after having watched the movie. So Tom Green, I don't know if he was a genius, but he was definitely onto something, and
Yeah.
he had probably the most important trait of any comedian or provocateur, which is knowing what makes people uncomfortable.
Yes.
A lot
Yes.
of a lot of comedians just think that means being loud, being obnoxious, and just kind of acting bratty. And some of the most cringe-inducing scenes are some of the just more casual moments, like
Yeah.
just a simple cutaway shot to some poor kid getting hit in the face with a beer bottle.
Dude, it's brutal. The stuff that happens to this kid is brutal. Like normally in these kind of movies, right? There's always a character that's just like falling down or getting hurt, and it's always like treated as a laugh, and then you never really go back to it, and you don't really remember it, and maybe you'll remember like one or two. But this movie immediately, the first time this kid gets hurt, scars you for life. This
It
kid
scars you for
falls.
life, and this is where
It's
this
incredible.
whoops, I hit the microphone with my Chris Farley for president hat. Damn. But and that's where the satirical analysis from people like Red Letter Media comes in, that he is satirizing the comedies of his day, because again,
Right.
this
Yeah.
scene that he's coming from, it loved it loved really darkly abusive humor like that. I think it goes deeper, right? I think here's what I'm going to compare Freddy Got Fingered to, and this is not going to be a surprising comparison to people who know our tastes at all. I see it as the comedy Devil's Rejects. I see it as this movie that
Wow.
takes conventions that are adored by this very dedicated community, and I feel that it challenges that community by cranking those conventions up to an 11. And the people who are cool enough to stomach the side of like actual injuries upon children or the disabled, like those people get to ride the roller coaster, and the rest of them can fuck off. It's like this litmus
Yeah.
test, really, of taste. But before we even like go down the rabbit hole of analyzing this movie from every intellectual angle we can think of, I want to just talk about some things that I think are good in a very conventional way and did not get acknowledged. Not back then, and not even now. Really, I don't think people acknowledge just how fucking good Rip Torn is in this movie.
Oh yeah. So funny.
Just how perfectly
So funny.
cast, and how well he and Tom Green play off each other.
Dude, that so to this day in my family's household, that song that he sings with the sausages attached to his fingers is something that is repeated anytime the word sausage is brought up in my household.
And the weird thing about the sausage scene, and I think this speaks to what I meant. Like Tom Green understands what makes people uncomfortable. Like that's not a scene where anybody gets harmed. That's not a
No.
scene of dismemberment. It's
No.
not a scene that should be offensive, really. But for
It's
some
so,
reason, it
it,
offended people so deeply. Like it is
oh,
it.
oh my
I think
god.
that's the scene that might have really put the target on this movie's back.
Yeah, if not the scene where the kid trips goes face first into the car. I don't remember if that happens first. But
That happens first, but nobody talks about that scene. Everybody before I watched this movie, the scene I heard about first was the sausage scene.
Daddy, would you like some sausage? Oh my god, it's so ridiculous. But you know what though, like it does speak to the chemistry that those two actors have together. And it's still, don't get me wrong, there's still this feeling of awkwardness at times, but it's all intentional. It's all like it just works so well for me. I'm laughing my ass off every time those two share a screen together.
Yeah, and
It's incredible.
that's where I have to disagree with the late great Roger Ebert. I do think that this movie couldn't be accused of being funny. I I'm not proud of the number of times I laughed out loud. I'll say that.
Oh, dude, I think this movie is profoundly hilarious. I laugh at scenes that people would probably look at me with disgust for laughing at. Like that scene where at the beginning where Gord's about to take off in his car in his brand new LeBaron, and his dad's like, "You're gonna make your daddy proud," and they just go back and forth saying the word "proud" for like 2 minutes. It's incredible. It's so funny, and I think people would feel like they're too good to laugh at something like that. I'm not.
What
I never will be.
I think it goes back to my complaint, which is people refusing to ascribe intentionality to scenes like that. Like people just don't grant the idea that Tom Green knew that was awkward. Like he doesn't know how movies work. He really thinks that in a real movie, characters would talk to each other like this because there is something about it that reeks of amateur, right? Like
Yes.
some kind of film, like Baby's First Draft.
Or like a Neil Breen movie. You know, Neil Breen, like those interactions between characters are so profoundly uncomfortable that it's like nobody would ever do this.
And this movie, this movie came out before the So Bad It's Good movie really took our culture by the throat. Like there was
Yeah.
Mystery Science Theater, but usually like a So Bad It's Good movie was basically a really cheesy movie. Like
Yeah, it was like a movie that when people would talk about it, the things that they would say wouldn't be like, "Oh, it's so bad it's good," and like here's why certain scenes work. It's more like, "Oh yeah, like it's not like sort of what we've said a few times on the show," and I try to stop
right,
myself. It's
like
not going to win any Oscars, but it's
like
funny.
well, terribly awkward
Yeah.
like blocking, obviously fake sets and costumes. Like the So Bad It's
Yeah.
Good movie looked like
Right.
an Ed Wood movie. So
Yeah. Right.
it's almost like Tom Green predicted this, that our culture would become fascinated by this, because movies like The Room and the Neil Breen stuff that comes after this, we love that movie not because the sets looked fake and not because they even looked badly made. Like The Room was made by a professional crew in Los Angeles. It had millions of dollars invested into it. No, it was made by a bizarro mind that did not understand how people
Yes.
worked, how life
He
works. Like
it's like a movie was made. See, okay, and I think this is where I will say like outright as well with with this movie. Like this is not an example to me of so bad it's good.
no,
But I think that there's a profound difference between those two movies, and I want to break it down like this. I believe wholeheartedly that, it's documented that Tommy Wiseau was trying to make a serious Hollywood movie. He was trying to make the best movie of all time. He thought he had the best movie of all time, and it turned out the way that it was. And we laugh at it. We laugh at it, and I don't feel like this is a movie I am laughing at. I'm not laughing at this movie. I'm absolutely laughing with it, even at points that I don't think a lot of people are laughing with it. It's a
the
different laugh.
intention is so clear to me. There's nothing
Yes.
murky. Um there's nothing that's not speaking to the fact that Tom Green is executing a vision. Like that's the thing.
Right.
That's why I call him a vulgar auteur. And he's as much of an auteur as he is vulgar, and he's pretty vulgar. He's
Oh
pretty
yeah.
goddamn vulgar
Oh
in
yeah.
this movie alone. Like there's no 10 minutes that go by without something that
Something profoundly offensive
that would
happened.
get you banned off of YouTube or Twitter or any one of these platforms, right?
Or like a Eastern European country, you know, like
Like,
like you wouldn't be welcome back if you did any of what happened. You'd be in jail if you did half of the things that happened in this movie, let alone all of them. Um, and but the intention is there throughout. Like I don't think there's any point in this movie. I think what confuses me about the way that people take to it is I would understand if somebody was like, this type of comedy isn't my thing. Because it really isn't for everybody. Where I get confused is when people start to say that he was trying to be funny and missed the mark. There's so much intention behind everything. I mean, even the smallest scenes, like where he's giving Betty the jewels. He spent $125,000 on the jewels. It's like, who the fuck would think of something like this? It's so
she
intentional.
doesn't care about the jewels. All she
Uh,
wants to do
which is also great. It's also great.
And let's talk about her some, because I was actually very surprised at how invested I got in their relationship. Like, and I haven't spoken even about Tom Green's performance in this movie, and a lot of people won't even like grant it that this is a performance, right? This is just Tom Green kind of doing what he does. But
Yeah.
I I really appreciated the the extent to which Gordy felt like his own character and not a Tom Green persona. Gordy is a severely deranged individual, but he has clear motivations, and his arc could not have been more clear to me, right? His little hero's journey and his relationship with Betty is exactly the relationship that represents his growth. We see how he's changed through his relationship with her, because at first he is embarrassed about being a failure. He is a loser. He has to pretend to be a stockbroker um, through the most mind-numbingly convoluted means necessary. But he goes to those lengths because that's where his character is at, and it's through her accomplishments, her dream, her
Yes.
achieving her dreams of creating a rocket powered wheelchair that I'm sure she is not allowed to drive anywhere in
It's
within,
not street legal.
civilians. No way, it's not street legal. But she proves him wrong. She's not the stupid dummy that he had assumed she was. Another piece of dialogue that keeps coming back up. He just can't stop calling this poor crippled girl a stupid dummy.
And
And he says it without any malice too. And that's the
yeah.
thing I really want to bring up about Tom Green. One valuable thing he said in an interview with Drew Barrymore, 15 years after they divorced, he went back on her show, and he seemed like a really sweet guy in that interview. And it looks to me like he has lived a life. Like he is he's a really soulful person. That's how he came across in that context. And something he said is that what he doesn't like about comedy today versus his comedy is that comedy today is very mean spirited. And he never wanted people to think he was mean, which is kind of like a crazy thing for somebody like him to be concerned about, right? He's like
Well, he's
defiling.
Canadian.
He's but that was like an interesting thing about Gordy, is that despite the fact that he is like like I would not want to be in a room alone with Gordy. I never ascribed maliciousness to Gordy. And the fact that I wasn't walking away with that kind of icky feeling, I think it's a testament to some kind of performance accomplishment.
I can certainly see where somebody would say this is just the Tom Green show, the movie, because he's not acting too much more. He's not acting too differently than his characters or than what you would see on his TV show, especially the public access days. Um, but I think what I like about this movie is that I do feel like we are getting a real look into Tom Green, but also he does have the sense to not go. I think he has the sense to go too far in areas that would get people's attention, not that would get people upset about something in particular. You know, like they'll be upset, like, oh, why he's swinging a baby by its umbilical cord, or he's jerking off a
Well,
horse and an
it's very
elephant.
important to note, and I'm not trying to make him sound like a saint. I'm not trying to say what
No,
he does is in
absolutely
good
not.
taste, but it is worth noting that the punchline of that scene is that he delivers a baby, in that he actually he does the job. I mean, I expected that
To
baby to
fly
not
out the
make it
window
through
or
the scene.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's actually a chance for Gordy to do some real good in the world. He delivers this woman's baby, and he gives this woman her newborn baby. Like, the punchline is actually kind of wholesome, and I think that goes for a lot of comedy in the movie. I mean, yes, uh Betty doesn't say, "Oh, I want to be with you, Gordy," like a normal movie girlfriend. She says, "I want to suck your dick." But I feel like it's coded with romance and it's coded with sweetness.
Well, you know what I noticed? Like, I felt like she did two things that really surprised me in this movie, especially the most recent time that I've watched it. By the way, I've seen this movie quite a few times. I think what I really like about that character is she is accomplishing two things at once. She is both making fun of the unimportant girl. I mean, she's effectively making fun of a character like the girl next door. You know, we talked about that movie and how there's a period of time where you just forget she exists in the movie, but at the same time she accomplishes being an important character in the movie. She quite literally gives Gord or Gordy
She,
the motivation to make it.
as far as love interests go, as far as girlfriends go, especially in this era of misogyny comedy, like frat bro comedy, it's one of those things you can't believe that it's true, but she is a much more well developed character than those movies. I, and that's the thing again, like you put this movie in 2001, it's misogynistic. If you put it in 2023, 2024, it's like sex positive. It's, she is a cripple, but we do not feel bad for her. She doesn't feel bad for herself. She has learned to embrace this as part of her lifestyle. And part of that is having Tom Green whack her repeatedly in her uh, numb legs with a
And
bamboo
I
stick.
and I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to make sure that we didn't gloss over the fact that there are jokes made at the expense of things in this movie. They just don't seem to come from a super mean place. They don't seem to come from a place of like, hey, bringing back up girl next door. You know, there is a butt of the joke that this kid is funny and foreign. You know, he's funny because he's foreign. So Samwang, and they're calling him Samsung, and that like that's no matter how you frame that, that is a joke that comes from a mean place, whether you find it funny or not. And I'm not gonna jump into that debate. You know, if you want to
Yeah,
listen to
well,
that
the
episode,
joke
go listen to
there,
it. But
look, it's very simple for me to test uh if a joke is okay. Let me rephrase this. The question isn't, is this mean spirited, right? It's, does this joke exist for the sake of putting people down, like belittling people, of belittling a member of a marginalized community, or just is the joke just a form of bullying, basically? And the thing is, that joke you mentioned in the girl next door, it's not about the fact that it plays off of the culture of another group. It's that the joke is just that the kid's Asian. I mean, I don't really know
right.
a more charitable thing to say about that joke. And the joke in the movie here isn't that this girl is crippled; it's that she is freaky about the fact that she is crippled.
Yeah.
And you can say, I'm not saying that this movie would survive the kind of like political minefield that we're in today. Probably far from
No.
it.
Yeah.
But it as a snowflake myself, as somebody who's perfectly willing to call out offensive jokes when they cross a line, I wasn't offended. I kind of admired the fact that he was playing with fire, and I think he's followed that fire.
He was playing with explosives, dude. Like
Yeah.
he was not just lighting a fire in his backyard and hitting it with some, with some lighter fluid to, get some high flames there. That man
He
was
was, yeah.
tossing grenades.
He was
He
playing
was
with
playing tennis
rocket.
with grenades.
He was playing with rocket fueled wheelchairs. Is what he was
Yes.
doing.
And it's and there are things in this movie that I think are a little more tame, that are not turned up to a million. Anthony Michael Hall's character isn't necessarily turned up to a million. Although finally somebody fucking uses the guy right. He looks like a toolbox. Nobody wants to cheer for this guy. Make him a douchebag. They made him one.
Well, they did that all the way back in 1990 with Edward Scissorhands. I mean, I think
And they should have kept doing it because that's all
as
I see in that.
soon as he hit puberty, like Hollywood decided that he is good for one thing, and that's playing assholes.
Until David Gordon Green came along.
But he
But we're not
plays
gonna.
he plays Tommy Doyle as an asshole. Maybe you don't think that was intentional.
I don't think it was, and that's why I have such a big problem with that film. But that's for a different time.
That's for a
I'm sure
different
it will
time,
come
but
up.
it's if we're talking about Anthony Michael Hall and the weird career he's had.
What a fucking weird career he's had, right?
First off, he's very good in this movie. I mean,
It's no Miami Blues, but
and the art of playing a dick is not one that comes easy. It's not one that I think you can dismiss. I I think one of
yeah,
my favorite scenes is his little his restaurant encounter with Tom Green, who arrives, and one of the most like obviously funny jokes, like one of those jokes that just kind of I think would fly in any context. Tom Green comes in as an English Bobby because
oh,
he's trying to impersonate
so
somebody,
good.
and he decides to impersonate an English Bobby. And I don't know why that was just automatically funny to me.
So funny. It was so funny too because it comes back like he doesn't. It's not like ignored for the purpose of comedy. Like they get outside and he's like, "You come into the restaurant dressed like a fucking Bobby," and like like they make a joke about it. It's not just that it's the joke that he's dressed funny. Um,
Yeah, and that's where
it's
intentionality comes in, and that's a moment
right.
where Tom Green does let you in on the joke. He does let you know that, of course, this is silly that Gordy would come in dressed as an English Bobby. And
And he's
Tom Green, I know that.
and he's walking into a restaurant called Movers and Shakers because you know the big wigs all eat there. And then earlier in the movie, when his dad interrupts him, he's supposed to be at work and he's on a date with Betty. The waiter breaks up his fight with his father by saying, "This is a fancy restaurant," as if you know you can't fight in a fancy restaurant.
You can't find here. This is the wait. You can't find here. This is the war room. From Doctor
it's
Strangelove.
it's it's so good. And again, I can see where somebody would see some scene like that and be like, "Oh my god, what the hell? This is terrible." But that means you are completely not on Tom Green's wavelength, which I can say admittedly, I get where somebody would say, "I don't want to be on Tom Green's
No,
wavelength."
and everybody has the right to not like this movie. Everybody has the right
Yes.
to hate this movie. I mean, this movie is
Absolutely.
exceptionally crude. Um,
Insanely.
it's clever in a
The
lot of
title of
ways,
the title of the movie is about diddling kids.
and more offensively to me, it's one of those movies where the titular plot point is the most useless part of the movie.
And, and that's another part of the movie where everything feels so incredibly intentional because the place that for those who don't know where the title of this movie comes from, there's a scene where Tom Green and his family are in with this psychiatrist, and Tom Green accuses like his father of molesting his brother Freddie, and and
And
then
they take the
they take
25-year-old Freddy into child services.
it's not even dude, what makes it so great is that they take him to a facility called the Center for Molested Children. Are you kidding me? That's so fucking on the nose. It's so
It's
intentional
so
and
on the
fucking
nose.
hilarious.
Now, I should lobby an actual criticism at this movie, which is yes, from a screenwriting perspective, it's almost asinine how little this has to do with anything.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's great to see that one guy from American Pie
Yeah.
being taken on this ride. He was my favorite actor in American Pie 2.
And
And
dude, he really does he does shine in this. Like let's not like
he has a welcome presence in this movie for
I
sure.
love to see him here. He plays his role perfectly of this just like he's one of those characters that's like it's not done the exact same way, but like for people who haven't seen this, maybe if you're an SNL fan, think of like the SNL Weekend Update sketches where Stefan shows up and you have Stefan who is this outrageous, loud, ridiculous character interacting with Seth Meyers who is just tolerating this nonsense
Well,
the
he's
best way
just
he
a
can.
straight man.
He's the straight man. That this is that, but with a sibling aspect thrown in, and it's just so funny to see that like everything Tom Green is saying is like absolutely true. They absolutely do favor Gordon. Like it's not even
Well, do they
close.
favor Gordy? Aren't they just trying to get him out of that house?
Well, kind of, yeah, but they also completely ignore Freddy, and then he ends up getting taken off to the Center for Molested Children, which is insane. And again,
Where they
that
or
that made it into a
where they
movie.
showed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this is where
Okay,
my Rob Zombie comparison is really validated here.
yes. So I do have one thing to say about that. I don't I know it was intentional because we get this like juxtaposition shot where like so all these kids in this center who are all who were all molested are watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's the scene where she's getting hung on a hook. So it's brutal, just brutal violence. And then you cut to Gordy, who's watching like fucking what was he watching? Like Leave It to Beaver or something?
Yeah,
He
one
was
of
like
those wholesome all-American sitcoms from the 50s.
and it's like I went back and I searched for that part in the Red Letter Media episode a couple of days ago just to see if like I was like, what did they say about that? Because I have never understood what he was trying to say. Like maybe he was just trying to juxtapose it
What
in a
Tom
way
Green was
that's
trying to say?
yeah, that's the one thing that I believe was intentional. Like, but I don't get it. I get everything else he was going
I
for, but
don't think there's a I don't think there's a social critique there. I think he just I think it's one of those really subversive ideas. What if these molested kids
oh,
in this
that's just like
facility were
a
watching the Texas Chainsaw
okay.
Massacre? It was just,
It
it
could
was
be,
like
yeah.
it was just a joke about totally an inappropriate behavior. It wasn't a critique. I don't think it wasn't satirical.
Okay, I felt like he was trying to say something, but I wasn't quite getting it. But I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that tracks for me.
Yeah, I don't think, and we've used the word satire a few times. We're using that pretty loosely. I don't think he's saying much about broader things like culture, politics. There's some shots taken at family values. And by the way,
Yeah.
very present movie, very present uh when you get to the end and they've been taken hostage in the Middle East and they come back, they've escaped, and they come back into George Bush's America and everything looks like it's going to be fine, except for the kid who runs into the airplane propeller. But just again, weird thing that this movie came out in 2001. Weird thing. It makes
And
it feel like Tom Green literally became the Osama bin Laden of comedy.
it this could easily be seen as an attack on comedy. And I wanna ask you if
It
you
was an
can
attack on
understand
American
that.
values for sure, for sure.
It was an attack on, you know what, like this was not only just an attack on American value, it felt like an attack on everything that it was touching on, and not again, not in a mean spirited way, but like even the movies of that time period, it's incredibly clear when you watch this that it is taking things that you would expect to see from a movie that came out around this time period, a comedy film, gross out scenes followed by scenes of the utmost sincerity, and we're supposed to take them seriously, and it takes that and it literally just blows it up in your face, and it does it in such a way that's still funny to me, but it doesn't get lost on you that they're saying like, oh, you like I can see Tom Green writing the movie and being like, oh, you'd probably think this would happen here, but guess what, I'm gonna I'm gonna deliver a baby, and there's gonna be Indian women drumming behind me on a bed, and that's what we're gonna do, and that's what this movie is gonna be about. And uh, it's there is not another movie like this. There are a lot of other movies that do parody and that do satire and that do commentary and do whatever else. There is never going to be and never has been a movie that is quite like Freddy Got Fingered. And is it an attack on comedy and family values? I think so,
To
but I
say it's an
don't know that
attack,
that's
I
a
don't
bad
think
thing.
it's not coming from a place of hate, right? It's not an
No,
attack in there's deconstruction there, but it's I think it's somebody who was a part of a movement that was supposedly about pushing boundaries. And it's like, George Carlin's routine of the 7 words you can't say on television. Like it's
Right.
routine, where the joke is how offensive it is. Like,
Right.
that's the punchline, right? It's in a universe where we're not so protective of children, I think all those scenes of that poor kid getting abused, I think that would be lost on the audience, just because it wouldn't be playing off of anything. The joke is how flagrantly this flies in the face of good taste. The same way that,
Right.
like, it's the same thing where I'll bring up the Sex Pistols again. No, the Sex Pistols couldn't play their instruments. That was not the point. People did not go to Sex Pistols concerts to, to because they thought they were seeing the next Beatles, right?
Right.
It was it was about assertiveness, and it was a celebration of not giving two shits.
I would agree. I would agree, and in a weird way, and again, I think it all comes back to this. The movie feels like a commentary about itself. It feels like it was a movie made about Tom Green being given money to make a movie, and or to make his MTV
Well,
show,
you know,
whichever one you want to say. I
I
mean, it
mean,
really feels like that.
on paper, it becomes very clear when you just look at Gordy's character arc, right? His journey.
Right.
He is a terribly awkward, bizarre human being who wants to make it an entertainment, and he is not in tune with himself. That's why his art is very limited. And then once he learns to embrace himself, jagged edges and all, once he takes his things like his trauma and the things that make him, despite how profoundly distasteful they are, that's when he starts getting 7-figure checks. There
Oh,
is a
it's
valuable lesson to be had there. I mean, it's this movie understands comic timing. You can't take that away from it. When
oh,
Anthony Michael Hall says, I don't believe your pitch. No human being acts like this. And in comes Rip Torn. It's like a fucking hurricane of a human being. This like tipsy hurricane.
I've never heard a better way to describe either of those people. Rip Torn and Tom Green are like hurricanes of human beings. It's
Yeah.
perfect.
The Tasmanian Devil. That's what I always think of
Yes.
with Tom with Rip Torn, I should say.
Yeah. Very, very good. Very good comparison there. Um. Oh man, we've tackled a lot about this movie so far. Is there anything you want to bring up before we kind of give our final thoughts on the movie? Is there anything you feel has been left unsaid, or anything you maybe want to highlight before we take this home?
I just wish that we had gotten a chance to see Tom Green make a second movie. He did not get the chance to direct again, direct a feature film, that is. And his career kind of seems to take this his career seemed to take a hit from this. There's no doubt, even though
Right.
he's one of those guys who, made his whole persona on not caring what you think. I'm sure the fact that this movie barely broke even was not a good thing for his career, and I'm sure he knew it. I would like to have seen what a Tom Green filmography looks like. Like, what's the shape of Tom Green's career if he actually, if this clears, if this makes enough money and he can make more movies, what does he evolve to look like? I think, if you look at like a Sacha Baron Cohen type, he started out with like pretty like shock jock humor, and then he makes Borat, which is, it embraces all of those things, but also has a lot more poignant and pointed things to say. I would like to think that Tom Grade could go in that direction, or he could have fizzled out. I mean, that's the thing with these kind of one timers, right? There's so much mystique around it. Was all of the genius in this movie, was that a fluke, or was that really what Tom Green had to offer, and we were robbed of an even a version of Freddy Got Fingered by an even more sophisticated filmmaker.
You know, I do think that we deserved uh, us people who appreciated this movie deserved more Tom Green. I don't know that the rest of the world deserved Tom Green. um, and you know, some people are probably going to laugh at that, especially people who are around in the late '90s, who because even then, I mean, he was considered an annoying figure. You know, like he wasn't like a guy who everybody just sort of like took
Yeah,
to. He was definitely, um,
when Drew Barrymore, I'm sorry,
yeah.
uh, Drew Scabby Moore, I
Jesus
slip of the
Christ.
tongue. When she
I'm not
married
calling
him,
her that.
the world collectively said, "What the hell is she thinking?"
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, um here's what I have to say about Tom Green as far as he goes before, you know, wrapping up about the movie. I think it's incredibly sad, and I don't know if he's happy. I hope he is. He had a great career, made I'm sure good money. I'm sure he, you know, there are people who do appreciate him, but I sort of feel bad that Tom Green is not at a place where he's still getting regular work, and instead he is relegated to, you know, the Celebrity Apprentice, or you know, coming up on Twitch. You know, like somebody like Andy Milonakis, who was very much a Tom Green-esque figure, kind of showed up out of nowhere, very provocative. People didn't realize that he wasn't a child. You know, when he showed up and got the Andy Milonakis show, which was literally given to him because he was just like Tom Green, and they wanted another Tom Green show. Um, Andy Milonakis is a guy that I understand going the route of like, okay, I'm just gonna make this rap song over the "We Are Farmers" beat, over a beat with "We Are Farmers" in it, with like, you know, riff raff or whatever. Like that, I understand. Or him being an IRL Twitch streamer in 2023, like that makes sense in 2024 as well. I don't know, he's probably still doing it. But for Tom Green to be at the point where he is on those streams with Andy, it's upsetting to me that he has to be there. You know, there are places where I don't think he is above. You know, I saw he's in a very good clip. If you guys go on YouTube and you look up, there's a show called "This Is Not Happening." It was a Comedy Central clip show where people would come on and talk about real life stories that happened to them. Some great episodes with like people like Louis Anderson and Sal Volcano from the Impractical Jokers. But Tom Green told one about his experience on The Celebrity Apprentice, and still very funny, much more um, calm nowadays,
He's mellowed
poised, we'll
out.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, mellow is a good example, but again, you know, I don't see any excuse as to why Tom Green isn't in a writer's room somewhere at the very least, or why he's not popping up every once in a while on a
If
TV
he
show.
wants that. I mean,
Maybe, yeah,
I
that's the thing. I don't want to put that on Tom Green either. Maybe he's happier the way that he is now.
I don't know if happy is the right word, because I don't know how a guy like Tom Green achieves happiness. What does that look like? I mean, he was
Yeah.
world famous, and he had like one of the most beautiful women in the world was married to him at one point. Was he happier then? I don't know. He didn't, it didn't, it didn't seem
He doesn't
to,
talk much about how he feels.
no, his behavior would indicate that he was not content. And I think
Right.
for a guy like Tom Green, it probably is the question of how much freedom do I have to
Yeah.
be myself, right? Like Gordy. And the thing is, like Tom Green was given a blank check to take his personality to the extreme. Which, when you think about it, how many times have people been given millions and millions of dollars and the endorsement of Hollywood to just um, be as much of themselves as they could be? And I hope that doesn't sound overly corny or sentimental, but I think for Tom Green, that's what that opportunity probably felt like. And when he was awarded Worst Actor of the Year, was that people's way of saying, like, we don't just think you're not funny, like, we hate you and we really want to see less of you. I don't know. I hope this little reevaluation is of Freddy Got Fingered is on Tom Green's radar. He's a guy who deserves to know that there are people out there who see the light. Um, and I would like to think that if Roger Ebert were still with us today, he would listen to this episode of Not That Bad and say, damn, like these guys have me really thinking. I really need to give that a second watch.
Well, hopefully, who knows? Who knows? I do hope at least that Tom Green knows that there are people out there that do appreciate him, that haven't forgotten about him. I'm definitely one of those people. Tom Green comes up in my everyday life way more than actually Tom Green is actually a therapeutic thing for me sometimes, because sometimes I get real down on myself. People my age will tell me about some celebrity that they saw in the news or something that I've never heard of. And apparently they're in like everything now, and I've never heard of this person. And I just think back and I think, well, I feel about them the same way that, say, my grandparents would have felt about Tom Green. And that makes me feel a little bit better, because I happen to love Tom Green. So yeah, I think we said some nice things about Tom. I think we said some nice things about the movie. I'd like to see if you'd be comfortable starting us off here and giving us your final verdict about the film.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and read my letterboxed review because again, I watched this for the first time for this episode. I should have prefaced that.
Really?
Yeah, I should have prefaced
Wow.
that. Uh, it's one of those movies so notorious. I was always open to watching it, but I felt like I needed a push, like a real reason to finally sit down and engage with this.
Yeah, we're
So
good at that here.
my review is as follows: the noise rock of comedy. It flexes its right to be aggressively angular, probably to the point of being obnoxious. But it's a proud entry of vulgar auteurism that understands the basic tenets of comedic timing and setup payoff. You know, and I still feel like I haven't really fully processed the movies, although I can say that I respect it. And given that it's rising in reputation and allure, I think we're on the road to people embracing it to a level that it can be considered good or at least not one of the worst movies ever made, right? If you ask me in 2001, it's a hard, not that bad, right? But a 2.9 is the late rating on Letterbox, and I rated it higher than that. I gave it a 3.5,
Ooh.
making it a comfortable, actually good.
Wow. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. We have registered and actually good for a movie that is on the list of some of the worst movies of all time. Let's see if I come out the same way. And I
I will
hate to
say, can I say
spoil it.
one more thing? Can I say one more
Yes,
thing?
yes.
I have not seen a movie that's considered worst of all time that's ever been put in that conversation that is less deserving of that reputation. Uh, so wanted to throw that out there because when we like talk about this movie today, it's hard to remember that, but at one point this was in the conversation of worst movie
Right.
ever, and like I I I made a similar defense of Showgirls, but even I understand the idea of Showgirls being a all-timer worst movie more than Freddy Got Fingered.
So now here's the question: Is the spectrum Freddy's Got Fingered as on this side of movies that are very undeserving of that title, and is the other side Battlefield Earth, or what's the other side of that?
What's the other side? I mean, I think yeah, you can't dispute that The Room is as bad as people say it is.
Oh, I can a little bit because people do downplay its entertainment value. I think especially those who aren't in the movie community or aren't like really big into film. I think that they downplay how entertaining the movie is. There are people who say they'll never watch it because they know it's the worst movie ever, and I think that's a little far. I think Battlefield Earth would be at the opposite side of that. I've seen worse movies than Battlefield Earth. Believe me, I have. Especially in the horror genre, you get to some of those like cheaply made horror movies, and you really find some low level stuff down there. But I think a truly terrible movie, worthy of worst movie of all time, has every opportunity to succeed and fails, and that to me is Battlefield Earth. And I think I'd agree with you though that this movie would be
Very well put.
on the opposite side of that spectrum.
Obviously, look, Freddy Got Fingered is a lot of things, but propaganda for the Church of Scientology, it is not.
And at least we can say that, folks. Now, as far as mine goes, I've probably spoiled it all episode. I really do enjoy the hell out of this movie. It's definitely an in joke, and I like to joke that this movie's terrible. It's one of those things that I just I like to bring up, and I like to say like, oh yeah, it's terrible, but I love it. I really think I'm gonna stop with that joke because I've seen this movie a lot of times, more times than I think anybody should see Freddy Got Fingered. But I think I sort of realized how I felt about this when I learned that Tom Green had mentioned potentially doing a director's cut one day. And I was like, man, do I want to see what that looks like. And I really started to think like, my opinions on movies really started to change. I started over the last, like, I'd say 2 years. I started being a lot nicer to movies. I didn't go into a film wanting it to earn my respect. It had it when I came in, and it had to lose it in order for it to get a bad rating. And it's helped me when watching movies. It's helped me have a good time. It's helped me formulate what has become this show. And a movie like this is a big part of why I decided to start watching movies that way. And watching it under that lens and watching it under the lens of everything that we've discussed in this episode, I mean, I can't rightly give this anything lower than an actually good. This movie kicks ass. It's hilarious. It's ridiculous. One of the most insane things I've ever watched. But all of what I said is in one of the best ways possible. I do not think this is on the level of like a Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, where it's a misunderstood masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that movie falls into that category. I don't think this is that. When people tell me that they think that this movie is a masterpiece, all power to them. I just don't personally agree, despite the genius I do think is in the creation of this movie. That said, I think it's definitely worthy of a good.
Yeah, I
label.
think if he could have found a way to justify the insanity, I'm talking if I felt that the mania here was justified by the story when it is sometimes so clearly not, and is sometimes just a sidebar
Right.
for, kind of uh, perversion,
Right.
then it could have been a masterpiece, right? And that's why I kind of hesitated to use the word genius. I think there are flashes of brilliance in subversion. I feel like brilliance is sort of easy in subversion because you are going against conventional wisdom, which gives you the immediate kind of impression of being at least some kind of revolutionary thinker, if not a brilliant one. So Tom Green, he did have the opportunity, I think, to present himself as like a Sacha Baron Cohen like visionary of comedy. Don't think he quite hit that mark, but what he did do was prove how audacious he was, and that he had the muscle, the creative muscle to prove that in a feature length format, which is not easy. I mean, this stuff does not lend itself well to a feature film format. Some people would use this movie as proof of that, but I can attest to the fact that this was a surprisingly easy watch. Like, I was kind of dreading this watch. Like, I thought it was going to be interesting, but I didn't think I was going to actually be entertained. I didn't think I was going to laugh. And
Yeah.
God damn it, the son of a bitch, he got me. He
I'll
got
be
me a few
honest with you.
times.
I'll be honest with you. I have several movies on my list of movies to cover for this show that I put under a category in my head of movies that might make Gabe quit. And um, this was one of those movies, to be honest with you. I really believed it. And to give people a little of a glimpse behind the curtain here, when we discussed this as a potential for the show, it was my turn after Black Sheep, and I said, I think this is the movie, and his reaction was an excited one, and I was like, huh. I was genuinely shocked. I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. Maybe our show will continue, and not only has it continued, I feel we have grown stronger for
What
our
doesn't
love
kill
of
you makes
Tom
you
Green.
stronger.
Yes,
Okay.
and that has been Freddy Got Fingered, folks. Is Tom Green a genius? I don't know. Maybe answer that in the comments, along with your opinions of this film. Uh,
Is Tom Green the MTV Andy Kaufman? I want to leave on that question.
Ooh, yeah, he very well could be, maybe. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that and more in the comments. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode 2 of our second season here at Not That Bad. We're having a great time with these episodes. We hope you're having a great time too. And if you are, you can take our relationship to the next level. That's right. If you subscribe to our Patreon, you can take that relationship to the next level at any tier. You can get some special things like special episodes that we upload to Patreon from time to time. We are sort of working on our tiers right now. The show will continue to grow and evolve. We hope that you will continue to grow and evolve with us as a fan. But Gabe, as of right now, what are some of the cool things that they can get other than special episodes if they sign up for our Patreon?
What are some things they can get? I think I forgot.
Well, luckily I got your back there, because if you subscribe at a certain tier or higher, you'll get a exclusive Not That Bad sticker. You'll get access to different kinds of content that we put up on the Patreon as well. There's a lot of fun things that you can do. We're going to be again changing some things up probably on that Patreon depending on how the show goes this season. Again, we're growing and evolving just like anybody out there, and we appreciate you guys being along with the ride. But don't worry, because you don't have to just subscribe to our Patreon to support us more. You can also give our website a visit, notthatbadpod.com. We got a log of all of our old episodes on there. We have links to all of our social media pages, as well as all of the platforms that we post this show on. So if you, let's say you're watching this on YouTube, you want to make us a part of your morning commute, you can head on over to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your shows, and check Not That Bad out. Above all else, look, we hope that when you watch us, you have fun. That's what we're here to do. And no matter how you feel about this movie, we hope you had fun with this episode. And above all else, we hope that we made you proud. Proud.
All right, guys. Well, I gotta run. I gotta catch a bus to Los Angeles.
Oh no! Isn't Gabe coming back next episode? Oh man!
All right, guys. Yeah. Thank you for tolerating us long enough to get to the end of the episode. We really appreciate it. Until next time, I am Gabe.
I'm Connor.
And this is Not That Bad, signing out.